Hello, and thank you for joining me today on the Political Conversationalist. We're still talking about divisive issues, and today we're talking about one that comes and goes over the past decade of how divisive it is, but we're talking about capital punishment. I'm sure you read that in the thumbnail, I just wanted to remind you. So capital punishment, of course, is also known as the death penalty. When a crime is sufficiently severe, sometimes a person will be sentenced to death. They'll be put on something called death row, and then normally in about 20 years or so, they'll be killed by lethal injection. But there are many people who say it's wrong and many people who say it's right, and historically, the more conservative side of people has said it is right and necessary, and the more liberal side has said it is, wrong. So I'm going to give you some of the points from each side, and then I'm going to give you my opinion on the matter. For those who say it is right, many of them say it is a biblical mandate, and that is definitely true. In the Bible, it does prescribe, especially in the Old Testament, it prescribes the death penalty for numerous offenses. It also, obviously it's ordained by God. It is something that He wanted them to use and that He used Himself. They say that it is a deterrent to premeditated murder. A deterrent to premeditated murder, which means if a person premeditated, taking the time to think beforehand, if a person is thinking of committing murder, yet they know there is a high chance that they themselves will be killed, they're likely to rethink it. They also say that lifelong imprisonment is far too expensive, and the best average I could find for that is $44,000 per year per inmate. That is a whole lot of money. I can't even fathom the amount of people we have in prison versus $44,000 per year, and you see why we're running out of money so much. But they argue that fair is fair. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth, life for life. That's an old concept, a Bible concept, a historical concept that people have used forever. So that's also a justification people use for capital punishment. Now, those who say it's wrong, the first thing they often say is that not everyone who's sentenced to death is actually guilty. And they're right. 18 people on death row have been exonerated by DNA testing, since DNA testing became relatively recently available. The government doesn't have the right to take lives is an argument. They say that no one has the right to take any life for any reason. And for some reason, these are also the people that typically stand up for abortion. I digress. They say it's not really a deterrent. Sentencing people to death is not a deterrent. And a study by Duke University says that each death or each execution, including the trial and everything like that, costs the state of North Carolina $2.16 million. So definitely not a cheap thing to do for the average death penalty. Now, my thoughts are this. We do have an imperfect legal system, and there are wrongful convictions. The law only says that you have to prove beyond reasonable doubt. So, more than likely, such and such did such and such. Now, that's good enough for a conviction. I think that's good enough to put someone in prison, but I don't think that's good enough to sentence someone to death. However, there are many cases in which there is 100% absolute certainty that someone is the perpetrator of a crime. Either it be caught on video, either they confess, numerous eyewitness accounts, whatever it may be. There are cases in which there is absolutely 100% certainty that that man committed that crime, or that woman. And that is, to me, good enough for the death penalty. Executions do prevent killings. 4 to 25, according to the article I read, 4 to 25 murders are prevented for every state execution. Now, the reason I think we run into some terminology there is that the first study said that it's not a good deterrent to sentence people to death. And it's not, because when you get sentenced to death, you sit there for 20 years. But the second study actually looked at actual executions in real time, and each execution seemed to lessen the number of murders. I believe if there is a case of rape or murder, extreme child abuse, and there's 100% certainty that that person committed that crime, then they should definitely face the death penalty. Now, proponents and opponents of the death penalty will cite that expense. Now, the $2.16 million average is not the actual execution. The actual execution is less than $5,000. The expenses for all that is the original trial and then all the appeals that happen in between the sentencing and the carrying out of that sentence. That process needs to be streamlined. I think maybe a law, something like once you're sentenced to death, you only get to appeal it once, and you must be executed within 5 years of your sentencing. Something like that would definitely lessen the economic impact of sentencing people to death. Now, unfortunately, the study that also said it prevents killings, or executions prevent murders in the future, they say that the more press, the better. In certain countries, there are no, when someone is sentenced to death, in 1800s England, for example, it's just a small blip in an article in a newspaper. And that really doesn't do much. But in America, it gets more press. In some countries, in the past, they had public gallows where public executions were a part of, weekly, monthly life. And I don't believe it should be like that. But there is a correlation between how many people know about the execution and know about the case as compared with how many people will rethink committing that crime. Also, I would like to point out, since I'm a big fan of democracy and a big fan of the referendum, that 61% of people polled in a Gallup poll do favor having the death penalty. Like I said, if there's 100% certainty that someone committed rape or murder or child abuse, there's absolutely no doubt whatsoever, then I think they should be sentenced to death. I don't think they should be able to sit on death row for 20 years. I don't think they should be able to appeal at the cost of the state for 20 years. I think some common sense laws that allows them to appeal the trial once and that allow them 2, maybe 3, maybe up to 5 years to sit on death row, those laws could streamline the process and really actually see the good impact of using the death penalty. I know it's an unfortunate part of society, but there are those who disregard the value of human life, and if they disregard the value of someone else's human life, then they obviously by default do not value their own life that much as well. And I would like to point out one last thing. I didn't even write this down. I just thought of it and I didn't put it in the outline, so I apologize. But a long time ago I got in an argument about capital punishment with someone, and I talked about the forfeiture of basic rights. And they said that everyone has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, so the death penalty is wrong. But I would like to point out that crimes can take away your rights. Being a felon takes away your right to vote. It takes away your right to own firearms. And so by being a felon, you already lose 2 of your most important, in my opinion, 2 of your most important rights we enjoy in America. So you can forfeit your rights based on your actions. So it follows to me that if your actions are horrible enough, that you can forfeit your right to life. Kind of a dark and grim video today, and I apologize for that, but a very dark and grim subject that we unfortunately have to talk about because of the disregard for human life and disregard for others that people hold. Thank you for watching today, and we hope to see you next time. If you have any questions or comments, however, always leave them down below. If you have a long question, go to my Facebook page, email me through there. I'll try to hit you back through that. Thank you.